This is the Stuff Report, a weekly look at hoarding in the headlines. Here's what's happening.
This week, a new study asks a question people often assume they already know the answer to. When young people show hoarding-related behaviors, what happens over time?
And the answer is not one straight line, which is a useful reminder for everyone watching a loved one struggle and for every community trying to decide what help should look like.
Our top story comes from BMC Psychiatry. Researchers in Turkey followed 45 adolescents for 4 years after those young people had shown hoarding-related behaviors earlier in life.
Before we go any further, this is important. It was one relatively small study in one setting with young people. It cannot diagnose anyone listening, it cannot predict one child's future, and it should not be turned into a label for a kid with a crowded room.
Right, but it does give us something we rarely get in public conversation, a look at different paths over time. At the 4-year follow-up, some participants had progressed to a hoarding disorder diagnosis. Some continued to show hoarding behaviors without that diagnosis, and some no longer showed those symptoms.
The point is not to turn those numbers into a family forecast. The point is that the story was not the same for everybody. That matters, because people so often speak as if there are only two possibilities. Either it is nothing, or it is hopeless.
The study did find that greater symptom severity at the beginning was associated with persistence and progression in that sample. The authors argue for early identification and monitoring.
And in everyday language, early attention is not the same thing as early alarm. It can mean noticing that keeping things is causing real distress, conflict, isolation, or trouble using a space. It can mean asking curious questions before the relationship becomes a constant argument about what belongs in the trash.
That distinction is worth sitting with. A parent or supporter may see a pile and think the task is removal, but the person living with it may be dealing with memory, fear of waste, a sense of safety, or a decision that feels impossible from the outside.
Which does not mean ignoring danger. If there is an immediate safety issue, people need appropriate local help. But where there is time to build trust, the useful question is often not, how do we get rid of this today? It is, what is this situation asking of us over time?
That is the long view, not pretending every concern is the same and not treating an early concern as a verdict.
In another recent piece of research, a team in the United Kingdom reviewed 12 qualitative studies about what it is like for professionals and non-professionals to work alongside people affected by hoarding.
The title is a little academic. The findings are not. The review found 4 recurring themes. Relationships are complex. Possessions are only the tip of the iceberg. Helpers are constantly balancing difficult choices. And the work can feel like solving a puzzle.
That phrase, the tip of the iceberg, is probably familiar to a lot of listeners. The items are the part everyone can see. They are the part a landlord, a neighbor, a family member, or a camera crew can point to.
But the items are rarely the entire relationship. A supporter may be carrying fear. The person affected may be carrying shame, grief, anger, exhaustion, or the memory of every time someone took over. Both people can be worried about safety and still disagree completely about what should happen next.
The researchers do not offer a magic formula. They do underline the ethical and practical tension helpers face.
That can be a relief. It tells supporters there is no single perfect sentence and no one perfect way forward. The work is often to stay connected, be clear about real limits, and avoid confusing urgency with control.
A people-first response can also be clear. There is room for open conversation and practical next steps.
Exactly. Respect is not pretending there is no problem. It is refusing to reduce a person to the problem.
One more item caught our attention this week. A public newsletter from the Chelmsford, Massachusetts Senior Center described 2 15-week decluttering workshops offered in what it calls a relaxed, non-judgmental atmosphere. The same calendar also listed an HD resource group.
We are not evaluating that program from a distance, and one town's model will not fit every community. But it is a useful example of a different instinct.
Instead of waiting for a crisis and then asking one agency to solve it, the community is making room for skills, conversation, and connection over time.
That matters because the public response to hoarding too often begins when somebody is already at the end of their rope. A notice appears, a relationship is broken down, an inspector, family member, or neighbor has reached a limit. By then, everyone is playing catch-up.
A workshop is not a cure, and a resource group is not a replacement for the kinds of help a person may need. But a consistent, no-shame place to practice decisions can be more useful than a one-time lecture about getting organized.
And it gives supporters somewhere to turn before their only idea is a surprise cleanout. Community infrastructure may sound like a big phrase. Sometimes it means a room, a regular meeting, a phone number, and people who understand that lasting change takes more than a dumpster.
So, what do these 3 stories have in common?
They make room for attention without turning attention into a verdict. The youth study says trajectories differ. The helper review says relationships and ethical choices are part of the work. The community example says support can be built before every door is closing.
That may feel less dramatic than a before and after photo. It is also more honest.
For listeners who support someone else, try a question that opens a door. What feels hardest about making decisions here? Not because one question solves the situation, but because it tells the other person you are interested in their experience, not just the visible evidence.
And for listeners who feel overwhelmed by their own belongings, a small next step still counts. One conversation, one safer path through a room, one decision made with support instead of in secrecy.
The long view is not passive. It is patient, practical, and honest about the fact that people are more important than a perfect-looking room.
That's the Stuff Report for this week. Our sources are linked in the episode description.
Thanks for listening.
That's the Stuff Report for this week. We'll see you next time.